The bell above the door jingled, but no one looked up. It was a quiet night at Marley's Diner, the kind of slow evening where the biggest excitement was an extra order of fries. Sarah, the lead waitress, barely glanced up from wiping the counter. It was just another shift, another long night of serving coffee to tired truckers and the same old regulars. Then a smell hit her. It was sharp, pungent, the unmistakable stench of unwashed clothes and days spent on the streets. Her nose wrinkled instinctively as she turned her head toward the door. Standing there, just inside the entrance, was a man who looked like he had just crawled out of an alleyway. His hair was long, unkempt, and streaked with gray. His beard was thick and wild, and his clothes, an oversized tattered coat and ripped jeans, hung off him like they'd been scavenged from a dumpster. A homeless man. Sarah's stomach sank. She could already feel the shift in the diner's energy. A few customers at the booths cast uneasy glances at the newcomer, subtly shifting in their seats. The older couple by the window whispered to each other while one of the truckers, a burly man with a thick mustache, muttered something under his breath. Sarah sighed. This was the last thing she needed tonight. The man shuffled forward, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets, his eyes scanning the room before landing on a empty booth near the back. Slowly he made his way over, ignoring the stares and hushed murmurs around him. Sarah hesitated. She knew what was coming. She could already hear the complaints forming. She could see the scenario playing out. This guy would sit down, probably order nothing, make the customers uncomfortable, and then she'd have to be the one to deal with it. She hated these moments. Steeling herself, she grabbed a menu, plastered on her best fake smile, and walked over. "Sir," she said, keeping her voice polite but firm, I'm afraid we have a policy about seating customers who, Coffee," the man interrupted, his voice surprisingly deep. He met her gaze, his piercing blue eyes holding something unreadable. "Just a coffee, please." Sarah hesitated. She could just refuse. She had done it before. Politely asking a homeless person to leave, claiming the diner was full, or that it was against policy to serve non-paying customers. But something about this man made her pause. Maybe it was his voice, or maybe it was the way he looked at her. Not with desperation, not with expectation, but with something calmer, more certain. Still, she couldn't risk the complaints. "I'm sorry," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "We don't do free handouts." The man's lips quirked up slightly, not quite a smile, more like amusement. "I didn't ask for a handout," he said simply. "I'll pay." Sarah blinked. Now that was new. Most of the homeless people she'd encountered either begged for food or stormed out when refused. This one was different, but she wasn't convinced yet. She crossed her arms, glancing down at his coat, his frayed sleeves. With what? Slowly, the man reached into his pocket. Sarah tensed, half expecting him to pull out a handful of crumpled bills or worse, a sob story. Instead, he placed a crisp $100 bill on the table. Her eyebrows shot up. "Will that cover the coffee?" he asked, his voice tinged with something she couldn't quite place. Challenge, maybe? Sarah stared at the bill, her mind racing. This had to be a trick. There was no way this man, this homeless man, had a $100 bill to casually drop on a cup of coffee. Unless... A small nagging thought crept into her mind, but she pushed it away. No, it couldn't be. Exhaling sharply, she snatched up the money. "Fine," she muttered. "One coffee." She turned on her heel and stormed toward the counter, feeling the weight of the other customers' stares. This was weird. Something about this whole situation didn't sit right with her, and she had no idea just how much stranger it was about to get. The man she had nearly kicked out, the man she had dismissed as just another homeless guy, was offering her an opportunity. And for the first time in her life, she realized just how wrong she had been. She picked up the card and smiled. Sarah set the coffee down in front of the man, still eyeing him warily. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. The man shook his head. "This'll do." He picked up the cup with steady hands and took a slow sip. For a moment he just sat there, savoring the warmth. Sarah couldn't help but watch. There was something off about him, something that didn't quite fit the usual homeless stereotype. He wasn't jittery or desperate. He didn't try to beg for food or slip out the door with stolen sugar packets. He just sat there, perfectly composed, drinking his coffee like he had all the time in the world. Then he glanced up. "You always judge people by their clothes?" he asked casually. Sarah stiffened. I don't judge anyone, she shot back. The man smirked. Sure you do. You assumed I couldn't pay before I even sat down. Sarah crossed her arms. You can't blame me for being cautious. I don't, he said, setting his cup down. I just think it's, interesting. Sarah huffed, ready to leave the conversation at that, but then... I used to own a place like this, the man continued. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You owned a diner? Something like that. He swirled the coffee in his cup. It started small, grew bigger, then bigger. Eventually, it wasn't just a diner anymore. Sarah frowned. What was he talking about? The man smiled, but there was something sad in his eyes. Funny how things change, he said. One day you're at the top of the world. The next you're sitting in a diner where the waitress doesn't even want to serve you. Sarah felt a twinge of guilt. What happened? She asked before she could stop herself. The man shrugged. Business is ruthless. One wrong decision, one betrayal, and suddenly you're out. It's easy to lose everything when you trust the wrong people. Sarah hesitated. This wasn't the usual hard luck story she was used to hearing. There was something in the way he said it, like he'd lived it. Like he wasn't just talking about losing a job or an apartment, but something massive. Then he leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Sarah. She stiffened. I never told you my name. The man chuckled. It's on your name tag. Sarah felt stupid, of course, but before she could recover, the man held out his hand. Nice to meet you, he said. I'm Kimbal Musk. The name slammed into her like a freight train. Her stomach dropped. It couldn't be. Kimbal Musk, as in the Kimbal Musk. The billionaire entrepreneur, the restaurant mogul, the guy who co-founded one of the biggest food tech companies in the world, the brother of Elon Musk. Sarah's mouth went dry. She looked at the man again, really looked at him. The piercing blue eyes, the angular features. The resemblance was there, hidden beneath the scruffy beard and worn-out clothes. Oh, my God. She had just refused to serve Elon Musk's brother, and he knew it. Sarah's breath hitched as a wave of panic surged through her. She had messed up. Badly. Kimbal watched her reaction with quiet amusement. He didn't look angry. If anything, he seemed entertained. She started, but the words died in her throat. What was she even supposed to say? Sorry, I treated you like a nobody. Sorry, I almost kicked you out because I thought you were homeless? Kimbal leaned back, his smirk never fading. You look like you've seen a ghost. Sarah swallowed hard. I didn't know. I know you didn't, he said. That's the point. Her heart pounded. The point? Kimbal took another slow sip of his coffee, then set it down with a soft clink. You assumed I wasn't worth your time, he said. But if I had walked in here wearing a suit, driving a fancy car, you would have treated me differently. Sarah winced. He wasn't wrong. You're not the first person to judge me like that, Kimbal continued, and you won't be the last. But let me tell you something, Sarah. He leaned in, his voice softer now. People aren't always what they seem. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah lowered her gaze, shame creeping up her spine. She had prided herself on being fair, on not being one of those people who judged others by appearance alone, but tonight she had failed. Kimbal reached into his coat pocket again, and for a brief second she thought he was going to pull out another $100 bill. Instead, he placed something small on the table. A business card. It was simple, black with white lettering. His name, his company, a phone number. Sarah stared at it confused. Kimbal stood up, adjusting his coat. I don't need a free meal, he said, but I do need people who know how to learn from their mistakes. Sarah blinked. What do you mean? Kimbal smiled. If you ever want to work for something bigger than this diner, he tapped the card, call me. Then without another word, he turned and walked out the door, disappearing into the night. Sarah sat there, heart still racing, staring at the business card in front of her.